Guess what's back? Business and Brews, where real business talk meets real people and always fueled by a good brew. This time we're going podcast first, bite-sized, insightful, and built for conversations you'll want to share. I'm your host, Matt Pierce, founder and CEO of Immediate, and I'll be sitting down with leaders, entrepreneurs, and friends to talk about leadership, growth, and the stories that make business worth talking about. So grab your favorite brew, pull up a chair, and let's talk business the way it's meant to be talked about. Business and Brews, back, bolder, and better than ever. Welcome to Business and Brews. I'm your host, Matt Pierce. I've got one of my mentors, Mason Beard. Mason was the first person that I pitched the idea for Immediate to back in fall of 2018. Which is hard to believe it's been that long. It ended up taking us about a year to kind of like really put this thing together and get out in the market. But I remember going and pitching him an idea, and I was working on something else at the time. And he said, Matt, it sounds like what you're building today is a nice to have. And what you're talking about now with Immediate, the idea of providing people access to their pay in between paydays is a have to have for all the people in the US that are living paycheck to paycheck. And I remember I was sitting at a stoplight and he said, how many people live paycheck to paycheck? And I go, I have no idea. And he said, maybe you should Google that. And it had just turned red. And so I pulled my phone out and I Googled real quick. And at the time, it was 64%. Today, it's closer to 70% of the 180 million in the U.S. workforce that are living paycheck to paycheck. And so he said, hey, maybe you should go research that a little bit and come back to me. And so a few weeks later, I went and pitched him formally. And Mason ended up being the first investment into Immediate and is on our board and has been along for the ride the whole way, has been super instrumental in the growth and success of Immediate and thought it would just make sense for us to get together today. So Mason, thanks for being here. Excited to talk to you today. Mason started, built and sold a company called Wellcentive. It's in the population health and data analytics world and healthcare. Built that up and sold it to Philips and stayed there for a few years afterwards. And then today as an investor in a variety of different businesses, as an LP in some funds. And as I mentioned, board member here at Immediate. And tell us what's been going on in your world, what you've seen from an investor perspective, from an operator perspective, things that you've seen, challenges that you may have seen pop up and just kind of open up with that.
Wow. Where do you start? Because a lot has changed,
Nice.
certainly since 2018. I think, I'll pull back and say from an investor perspective, in general, I think we saw some hibernation. I think a lot of cash was sitting on the sidelines on when you look at like deal flow, capital raises, exits, and everything like that. And that has certainly changed. You can see and feel momentum of when I say deal flow, I mean people that are getting A rounds, B rounds, and then exit opportunities. You just see a lot more activity for 2025, which is encouraging. And I like to see that momentum. The other thing that is just, I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot, but the initial strategy of going from kind of a B2B2C opportunity where you go into an organization and you work through their HR department to, get your end user, the whole shift of going direct to consumer. That's been amazing. And I think that is the economy. I think it's like you stated earlier, the amount of people that are living paycheck to paycheck. I think a little bit of that is also that whole gig economy expectation. And, I think we talked about that. That was the original thesis is that expectation of if I've got a side hustle, I expect to get paid that day. And that thought has matured now to where now it's become an expectation of, wait a minute, why are you holding, if I've earned it, why are you sitting on it for 2 weeks or 30 days, et cetera? And then now, it's 2026 and we think about the direct to consumer angle. I think that awareness is just continuing to go up. I would love to say that Immediate was leading the charge there, but I think there's some environmental factors like the economy and affordability, which is all over the news. But I also think that the rise of these neobanks, so the Chimes, the Daves of the world, they're presenting a little bit of a threat to some of the traditional banks.
Right.
And the neobanks, I feel like that their pitch is I'm more in tune with the consumer. I'm more nimble. I'm more hip. I've got features that you care about. And, so it's interesting. I think it's accelerated, obviously, our business, but I think overall, fintech in general, the deal flow, the economy, the direct consumer and more mindfulness of the neobank offerings is pretty cool.
I recently met with somebody who works for a traditional financial institution, and they were talking about some of the similar things. And they said, one of the things that we're doing internally is we're trying to make sure that the younger generation understands that we're here to support them. And the asterisk I would say by that, I spoke a few months ago at a university. I won't say which one because it's not my alma mater. And so I go and I speak there, and as I was talking, I said, "Hey, there's probably 40 kids in the room." And I go, "Hey, how many of you bank with a traditional bank, right?" Like, and rattled off a couple of the top 10 banks in the country. And I would say probably 30 to 40% of them raise their hands. Now, think about that, right? Think about 20 years ago, if I would have asked that question, about 100%, right? 100% of them said, yeah, traditional bank. I don't even know
Easy.
what a non-traditional bank is, right?
That's
And
right.
so the other percentage, I'm like, all right, well, who the rest of you banking with? And they start calling it out. And it's, well,
Yep.
I just use Cash App, right? Or I
There
use,
you go.
I'm primarily working in and out of Venmo. My parents put money in my Venmo. I use that debit card. It's Chime. It's all the ones you just mentioned, right? And so I do think that part of this is traditional banks are starting to look at how do we make sure that we're catching a younger generation as they're coming out. When I was in college, I didn't have any money. I realized why banks weren't chasing me because I wasn't making anything, right? But once I got out into the real world and I started having an income, I was like, all right, well, I need to pick a bank where I can put enough money in there where I don't have a monthly fee,
Yeah.
right? Maybe a bank where I can get some rewards for using a debit card. But there wasn't a whole lot much more, right? I may have thought at that point, I don't think I was making enough money to really be thinking about savings, but I may have been looking for a high yield savings. But traditional banks are typically not going to pay you a whole lot there. And so, but you think about what's going on online with a lot of these where I could literally pick up my phone, go through a KYC process and start to bank with somebody right here while we're sitting here, move
That's
money in there, set up a direct deposit, like do all the things. And they're going to be providing me with a lot of services. I do think you're right that that's something that we've seen this shift really quickly over the past couple of years. And I think to your point, a lot of it is the more and more people in a traditional W-2 workforce are one, doing gig economy jobs to make money on the side, right? To help make ends meet. But two, they're starting to expect, well, hey, if I can go hop in a Lyft, stay in my car and drive around, shuttle people back and forth to the airport or to parties or wherever, and at the end of the day be able to get my money, I should be able to do that when I go work at a brick and
right.
mortar as well. And so it has been an interesting past couple of years, and the challenges and the value ultimately that a lot of employers can provide there. So that kind of, I guess, a lead into that is we've seen some challenges as it pertains to how do we go and serve employers, and how do we serve employers in a way that ensures that they're improving loyalty and that their workforce is getting value from them. What are some challenges that you would say, and it doesn't have to be specific to immediate, right? But challenges that we've faced, that you've seen, things that you've kind of gone up against over the course of the past year or two, and what have been some ways that you've responded to those challenges in real time?
That's a great question. On a personal note, talking about the banks, I think there's a accessibility perception. Got 3 kids, 2 of them are out of college. You're lecturing to students, and I'm seeing them real time because they're my kids. And
You're
there's
lecturing to them
this.
every year.
That's right. Yeah, they never miss a lecture. But it's an accessibility perception. It's this, what is the frictionless way to partner with a financial institution? And that's
Hmm.
the route they're going to go. And I think that that's the winners right now are going to acknowledge that barrier and create paths that it's a frictionless way to access them. And so I'm just
Hmm.
seeing that in my own life with my two oldest. They're out of college now. From a, what are some challenges that we're facing? Looking backwards, and then I'm going to go positive, but I think there was a lot of misconceptions when you talk about accessibility and that perception of accessibility. I think the gut reaction is we have to protect the consumers, and what anything that is not traditional is seen as scary or predatory or dangerous.
Hmm.
Right. And you can say that might be just kind of the traditional institutions just being slow to adopt, or they want to protect whatever. But I do see that was an impediment,
Right.
right? That it's this kind of overcautious nature, heart's in the right place. We follow the CFPB very closely and kind of what their view on life. And I think that we overcame that challenge through advocacy and working with organizations and doing a lot of thought leadership on it, that our solution, a frictionless solution that's very accessible, is not dangerous.
Hmm.
And it actually is the opposite, where it protects you and it protects the consumer from really the bad guys. And so I think that we took a lot of bruises and fought pretty hard to change that perception. And that was a big one. That was a big hill to kind of overcome
Yeah.
in the
Well,
industry.
to your point, I think there's a little bit of there's the fear of the unknown. We all tackle that in day-to-day lives, just in whatever we've got going on. We're creatures of habit. We get stuck in ways. And I've found that a lot of organizations, whether it be employers or financial institutions or regulatory bodies, there is this kind of fear of the unknown because they don't really understand. I mean, I literally just read something in the past couple of days that was about our industry, and it was just so absolutely wrong. Just the way that it was presented, I was like, this feel like this person or this group of people read about something, heard one or two negative stories, and just jumped to a conclusion that this entire earned wage access industry slash offering is bad, when in fact, when done the right way, it is so empowering. And so I'm right there with you. And I do think there's just a big part of that. We're all stretched thin in life. And when you couple a fear of the unknown with lack of research and a lack of conversations, I go back to the early days. Like I said at the beginning, we had the idea in September 2018. I don't think we launched our first client until September 2019. So it was literally 12 months. And for a while there, I was just chomping at the bit to go sell something, but we didn't actually even have anything to sell, right? It was just an idea.
Good concept. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I would, there were days where I would go, I remember some mornings, especially on Fridays, people would get their paycheck, and I would go and I would see payday loan shops where there were lines out the door.
That's right.
And I would park and I would go get in the line to ask questions, not like interview style, right? But I would go sit down, I would just get in the line and I go, I've heard this is a place to come when you need some money. I've never done this before. How does it work? In a lot of cases, people in the line didn't know how it worked. And I go, well, how expensive is it? Like, it depends on how much you get and how long you need it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, okay, this doesn't feel right. At the time, I had a little bit of that fear of the unknown. I didn't really understand a whole lot about the loan process. I had never had a payday loan in my life. And so to go sit there and get real-time research by talking to people who are doing this helped me understand, all right, well, this is why we need to build this in a better way, right? This is why we need to build it in a way that's not a loan, that doesn't impact credit, that is responsible, that has a low fee. All the things that I kept hearing, these people were getting caught up in these cycles. Let's do this in a way that doesn't do that to them. I do think you're right that there's these opportunities, and some of it isn't educational. We want to make sure that we're providing an authoritative voice in the market about what Immediate does. So I guess along those lines, like when you think about obviously opportunity you've talked about for growth at Immediate, can we talk a little bit about opportunities for growth as it pertains to artificial intelligence? You're obviously using in a variety of different ways, but like what are some ways that that you've jumped on utilizing AI, whether it's personal, professional?
It's funny. This does feel like the kind of the .com era of you can't go 2 paragraphs without mentioning, it used to be .com, but now it's AI. And it is kind of the similar story track of this is new, therefore by default, it should be scary.
Mm-hmm.
And people go, well, it's going to replace everybody. And, this doom and gloom. I actually have a very positive outlook on AI, and everybody you talk to has used AI in their life somewhere. And what I've found is your productivity goes through the roof. No matter what you're doing, if you are writing code, if you are reviewing legal documents, or you're answering support tickets, if you leverage AI, your productivity goes through the roof. But what I've also found, and I'm going to attribute this to a brilliant developer who told me this, he said, you'll always need a polisher.
Right.
And what he meant by that, and what I was like, man, that's really bright. AI can help you get to 75%.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take code, for instance. It can write code, but essentially the output will be at the level of a lower end developer, not your senior engineer.
Right.
And the senior engineer becomes the polisher versus writing line by line. And taking a rough cut stone, you didn't have a stone before and you used AI, but somebody's going to have to buff that thing out and perfect it. Talking to somebody who started a AI company for law offices, and same thing came up. You still need the polisher. Right. And development, you still need the polisher. And support in software companies, you can help accelerate the impact of every support person but you still need to have that human touch. I'm less of a doom and gloom person, and I'm more of how much impact and productivity boost is everybody going to get. So you're turning around documents, you're turning around code, turning around releases, podcast content, whatever. Through AI. And I also think, just one more going back to your first question, is why is there so much deal flow? Why is there so much optimism in capital markets? We have switched from sales to steam, and that kind of changes everything. So now we can ship things faster.
Right.
But yeah, I'm less doom and gloom, more excited about it.
I agree with you too. It's about creating broader efficiencies. If you can take someone and extend, to your point, you take a senior level engineer and you can improve his productivity by 20 to 30%,
Yep.
and you've got a team of 10 people, you can extend all of their productivity by 30%, then that's the equivalent of having to hire 3 more full-time people.
That's
and
right.
so you can stretch your team further, which I just think, to your point, leverage the right way in a variety of ways. People that are jumping over to ChatGPT and going, write this email for me and copy
Yeah.
paste. That's the same thing that you run into with a lot of stuff. That's what gives it a bad rap. Somebody sent me something the other day. It was an article. It was over in Europe, I think, but it was like such and such newspapers obviously using ChatGPT for their article writing. It's like at the end of the article, it has the last part, and it's like, would you like me to add some more? Like,
Right.
right. And it
That's
was
pretty
like,
lazy.
right. And I've gotten a couple of those. I've gotten a few, probably like you and most people that listen to this. My LinkedIn inbox is so full. It's never, the only time I go in there is typically just to clear it out, right, to get
Right.
the little notification off. But every now and again, I'll just kind of click through there, and I've gotten a few where people will leave the prompts in the message, and I'm just like, guys, I mean, like, one, I get it, you can use it at a high level, but you need to go in and you need to proofread, you need to tweak it, you need to adjust it. To your point, let it
Polish.
get you 60-70% of the way there. The fact that I'm copying and pasting and leaving prompts in there, like, this is just, I mean,
Right.
it
Right.
shows laziness, right? I mean, for me, you're trying to sell me something and you're showing me that you're so lazy that you're just copying and pasting everything. Like, that's
Right.
not going to work. You know what I mean?
Talking to my wife is doing a program in school, and I had to convince her. She thought that AI was cheating, and our discussion was, you download PDF documents that are research documents, load it into
Mhm.
AI to help you synthesize that information quicker. I said, well, that's not cheating. But the major hurdle was to get her to understand that the prompt is your IP,
Right.
because
Yeah.
the question, the documents are already out there and it's somebody else's IP. But
Mhm.
the way you're asking questions to ascertain what, weed out what you need,
Right.
that's your IP. And so anyway, that's just an example of this gut reaction of AI equals, something bad, or it's nefarious or cheating.
So, as it pertains to AI and or other metrics, like, what are things that, as you're evaluating companies for investment, what are metrics that you're seeing that are the most important things for companies when you're evaluating for your own involvement?
That's a great question. I mean, aside from the obvious that a company is not as strong, I mean, it's only as strong as their management team. So from
Right.
a who is at the helm is kind of the first check. But from a health perspective, and I think about like that business dashboard of, is your gas tank full? Is, oil pressure okay? I always look at bookings, because bookings to me cuts into, is your growth engine working? And it also cuts through any of the noise on implementation backlog and when did they sign the contract. All I know is that if people are signing contracts and your bookings number is up, you can figure out the rest. So bookings is very important to tell me that the market believes in the solution and you have a go-to-market strategy that's actually working.
Mhm.
And the other is net promoter score. I'm a huge believer in, if somebody's not eating what you're cooking, it's going to show up and you're going to get bad reviews. And those two work together. You can't have high bookings and a crappy NPS score,
Right.
because that means all you're doing is selling and you're not supporting or implementing anything else. But
Right.
to me, those after management, right, that's kind of a given. I look at NPS and I look at your bookings number per quarter.
The thing I would add to that, which I think kind of goes hand in hand, is if you look at bookings and then you roll down to net retention rates, and
Yeah,
that's arm in arm with net promoter
yeah,
score.
you
To
tie
your
those together.
point, I mean, that's, yeah, a company that's growing and that's not attriting
Yeah.
a bunch of business. I've got two more things I want to kind of cover with you, and one of them I think is really important, and it's really about health longevity. We're talking about business, and that's a pretty hard shift, but I think that so much of it plays into it. And just candidly, like you've been somebody I've learned a lot from. You're older than 50, but you're have the energy levels of like a 30-year-old. It always encourages me when I spend time with you. If there's some things that you could share that would help the app person listening to this, things that you've found that are helpful from a health perspective.
I should start off with a disclaimer. One of my good friends calls me as seen on TV because I'm a little bit of an evangelist when it comes to things that I read or that I see. And I've always got some new thing that I heard that I wear that proudly, the seen on TV. I always start with COVID. And philosophically, I believe that because of COVID, health and how we treat our bodies came into focus, where it was kind of just a moment in time where things got real fast. I also think that that was the start of a little bit of the fracturing of a mindset, right? So we always did traditional medicine and we listened to certain, schools of thought and authorities and everything else. COVID kind of like split us and started this thing into two camps. And I always loved it was a not famous quote, but I heard this guy quote. He said, if I'm in a car wreck, and this is post COVID, if I'm in a car wreck or I get stabbed, absolutely I'm going to use our healthcare system as it lives today to do emergency medicine or to fix me, right? Surgery, bone, whatever. But when it comes to general health, I'm not listening. And so it's kind of this departure from what are you doing and where are you getting your information? So what I've personally done from a dietary perspective, I'm trying to stay away from the seed oils, hydrogenated oils, things that would cause inflammatory response in your body,
Right.
and look at inflammation as the number one cause of all the things that are going bad in your body. So from a intervention perspective, we've talked about sauna use. And I'm a huge believer in the sauna. I've probably done that for a decade now. I think we do it like 3 times a week, let's say an hour a week. It reduces your cardiovascular risk by over 40%.
Wow, that's incredible.
And take that one intervention. Anybody listening to this podcast, whose primary care physician ever said that sentence? But what they did say, and I'm not ripping on them, I'm just noting that there's two schools of thought, is here's prescription A, B, and C that would help you with a variety of things that have to do with your cardiovascular health.
Right.
So cold plunge, the cold shock proteins and doing a cold plunge and kind of spiking your cortisol levels early so that by the time you go to bed, you kind of reverse that and then you'll get better sleep. So proper night's worth of sleep, but I'm a big believer in the cold plunge. Cup of coffee and a cold plunge in the morning, it's like AI, right? It doubles your productivity.
I like how you brought that back. That was good.
That's right.
So I'll ask you real quick. Do you couple cold plunge and sauna together, or is that something you split up?
Well, there's two kind of schools of thoughts or protocols, and the cold plunge on a daily is different than I've looked at, what HRV is, the heart rate variability score.
Yeah.
A way to work on that is a protocol where you go sauna for 5 minutes, cold plunge for 2, sauna for 5, cold plunge for 2. Or I think sauna is actually 15, 15, 2, 15, 2. And you do that 3 times. And what that does is your heart rate goes up and then it drops dramatically when you get in the cold plunge. So that's a protocol. I think Andrew Huberman came up with that, it's targeted to kind of improving your HRV, that heart rate variability score.
Yeah.
But from a day-to-day, a jolt of coffee, I'm a big cold plunge guy.
Well, one thing we didn't cover at the beginning, but you just mentioned jolt of coffee. It's Business and Brews, right? So when you're doing coffee in the morning, do you have like a special kind that you do? Like what's your go-to coffee?
My wife is a bit of a coffee snob. And so I'll give you 2 answers. One, we pride ourselves on her barista capabilities. So for the last, I guess, 5 years, and you've had one of mine,
I've had it.
We buy green organic beans, like we source those, and then I roast them. So I've gotten into kind of that coffee roasting thing.
Oh, that's
That was
awesome.
a birthday gift. And I said, along with it comes with free roasting,
Right.
I fill the little hopper up, I guess,
Oh,
once a
cool.
week. But from what I'm playing around with, I love the Laird is one of these mushroom based, either
Mhm.
focus or
Well, you got me on that. I had one of those this morning, actually.
those are those are really good. So I like Laird. I mix that up with some of, Carrie's fresh roasted bean lattes and stuff. But another thing that's kind of new, and this is the as seen on TV, I started getting into the raw milk and looking at the health benefits from like a gut biome and, removing all those chemicals that they have. Of course, if I go, every sticker says for veterinary use only, right? Again, remember
I was gonna
the
ask where you have to buy that, but
that's literally, it's the health authorities tell me that I can't drink raw milk, but that's a new one. So I'll drink that in the morning after my coffee. I'll drink a cup of raw milk.
you shoot it like, you
Like,
just, like, sip
inject
on it?
it? No, we take a spoon and no, I'm kidding. No, I just drink it. It's just cold. Yeah, a cup of raw milk is like my new thing now, along with that Layered, and then, mix it with
I've tried some of these before that are blended, have a mushroom blend, they've got lion's mane in it, stuff like that, but a
yeah.
lot of those are, like, dark roasts, and I just don't love dark roast as much. I didn't start drinking coffee till about 8 or 10 years ago, and I just had my palate's not really there with dark roast. I drink it every now and again, but it's just not what I prefer, but the Layered is more of like a medium roast, and so I've
Yes.
found that I've really enjoyed that, and I think one of the first days I drank it, I, like, sent you a text. I was like, "Man, I've been on fire this afternoon." I was out in for, like, 2 or 3 hours.
Liquid AI.
Yeah, it's like the world around me just became a blur, and I was just hammering things out, so
I've been a big fan of the AG1s,
mhm,
the Huel,
yeah,
and mixing that with creatine. So from a cognitive perspective, I mean, muscle growth, obviously, but a cognitive perspective, one little scoop of creatine in a daily supplement is amazing.
okay, interesting. Yeah, I do creatine in my, smoothie. I usually have a smoothie for breakfast, and I
Yeah.
do that, but, I need to I've never bought a thing at AG1. I've tried some similar to it, but, maybe that's something I need to check out. I got a final question for you. As we're running into 2026 here, hitting the ground running, lots of good stuff I'm excited about, but this isn't necessarily about me. Anything that you're top of the stack, what you're most excited about in 2026?
If you take everything we talked about, minus the layered coffee, the stars feel like they're aligning. And when I was talking about that perception of accessibility, I think that people see a solution like ours in fintech is more accessible. I
Mhm.
feel like that AI is more accessible and empowering. And I also feel like that the stars are aligning on optimism. When you look at deal flow and the amount of capital that's coming off of the sidelines and getting injected in,
Right.
I feel like all these stars are aligning. I'm super, super excited. 2026 is going to be one for the books. And more cold plunges.
And more cold plunges.
That's right.
Thanks for being on here, Mason. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here, Mason. Thanks for all the effort, energy, and support over the years. It's greatly appreciated.
It
Well, thank you guys for listening, and tune back in next week for the next one. Thank you, guys.